I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring people, you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
That.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this.
I'm not
You're in
dictating.
no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No, in this
even
entire
today.
meeting, you said thank
even
you.
Today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. You have just seen a clip of the incredible, if not unbelievable, shouting match that took place at the White House yesterday evening between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. According to the BBC, after it was over, President Zelensky was told to leave the White House. Whilst the details of what happened may be engrossing, what really matters are the implications and consequences. That's what I shall focus on today. My first guest is India's former ambassador to Russia and former Deputy National Security Advisor, Pankaj Saran. Mr. Saran, on Friday, the world witnessed an incredible, if not unbelievable, shouting match between the American president and the Ukrainian president in the Oval Office. After it ended, the BBC reports Zelensky was told to leave the White House. It's the implications and consequences that I want to discuss. But first, what was your response to this amazing development?
Thank you, Karan. I was watching it live and I actually couldn't believe that I was watching something which was real and not a AI-generated video clip. Because we haven't seen this in diplomacy and discussions between two leaders. So it was absolutely incredible, astounding, and it just reflected to me the huge emotions and the huge stakes that are involved for both sides in this conflict. And it was coming to a head, actually, in the last few weeks with a lot of shadow boxing between Trump and Zelensky and between the United States and Europe. So I think it was literally denouement of huge proportions, and it will definitely, in my opinion, accelerate and sharpen and harden the views. Certainly on the Trump side, I don't think Zelensky has much to offer. The Europeans, I think, will and have been making noises in support. But I think Trump was actually perfectly all right in expressing his views in front of the entire global audience. And basically, he's saying this is transparency at its maximum. I am not trying to make any secret deals. And this allegation that I like Putin and I'm close to Putin is not going to stick on me, and etc., etc.
As you say, you watched it live and you were mesmerized by what you were seeing. Do you have any sense from what you watched and the way it unfolded about who is to blame? Trump and Vance repeatedly accused Zelensky of being disrespectful.
I think, on balance, there's a lot of commentary out there, but I think Zelensky couldn't understand the feeling in the room and who he was talking to. I think he has also not internalized the fact that there has been a revolution in the United States. The comfort that he had with the Democrats and the Biden people is actually a thing of the past. There's no incremental change. There is a revolutionary change in the White House. And I don't think he was able to understand that very well. He still probably felt that he could do business as usual. So since he's a visitor to the White House, he's sitting in Washington, he's talking to the leader of the NATO alliance, the most powerful nation on earth, who has publicly staked his campaign and his victory on ending the war. I think he should have been more savvy and more intelligent about how he takes them on. I think obviously he felt cornered, he felt he couldn't handle the pressure, I think. And so therefore, I think one thing led to another. And I think there was a point in which he really lost it when he suggested to Trump that you would be next, a kind of statement. Don't worry, it's not just the ocean, but he's going to come after you. And I think that's where I think tempers frayed.
Absolutely.
And so
Trump lost his temper immediately.
Yeah. I mean, you don't tell the president of the United States. And certainly, look, the fact is they're not equals, right? I mean, Trump and Vance and Rubio said everything except they were decent and they didn't say the main thing. And the main thing is this, that this was a proxy war which began with the trio of Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Biden. Zelensky and Ukraine was a setup. The Europeans were asked to join the project. And today Trump is telling him, what I started, I'm finishing. And you were just a part of it. So you were a small component of a much bigger game that is going on. So you understand what I'm trying to tell you. Obviously, he can't say it in so many words.
But you agree with the view, which is coming out from Trump supporters in America, that Zelensky overplayed his hand. As you suggested, he didn't realize there's been a revolution in America. He forgot that they are not equal partners. He forgot that he's sitting in the White House with the leader of the free world.
And not just that, with a certain kind of leader. I mean, he has a great sense about himself. And I think Trump has, of course, look, the other thing is, they have a huge chemistry between themselves. And Vance didn't mince words. And he said, you were campaigning with the opposition in Pennsylvania. So this interference in the election campaign in the United States and what they perceive Zelensky's role to be, and the history between Hunter Biden and Zelensky and Ukraine, it's all come together with the larger geopolitical calculations. So I think Zelensky was really in trouble. And I think he's going to be in even greater trouble as he goes forward. And he could well be the fall guy in the event, not in the event, in the certainty of a peace deal.
Let's focus a little on the implications and consequences of yesterday's outburst. And let's begin by focusing on what this means for Zelensky and perhaps more importantly, what it means for Ukraine. Presumably, Ukraine is unlikely to receive any more arms and equipment from America. So when Ukraine runs out of the stock it already has, and there are predictions on CNN that maybe it can last till the end of March, maybe early April, then at that point, does Ukraine collapse to Russia?
No, I don't think Trump will allow that. I think he will find a deal. At least he will find a halt or a ceasefire or an armistice before that. The larger peace package will happen, but the immediate priority is to stop the fighting. And I think that, in my opinion, Trump will do. Obviously, he will not countenance the collapse of Ukraine. And if it takes for Zelensky to be moved out of the way, so be it. But Finally, of course, what he's also telling Zelensky is, if you don't agree with my analysis of where you are, you decide and you take the call. And so if Ukraine collapses, which it is, and everyone is saying it, then that's your responsibility. That's on you, not on me. I'm telling you, I'm trying to stop this.
How likely is it that Zelensky will be moved out of the way? I noticed that there have already been a few calls, maybe not very serious ones, within Ukraine from Ukrainian MPs calling for Zelensky's impeachment. Might he be removed because he's seen as the obstacle to a closer, better relationship with Ukraine's most important partner, America?
It's possible. I mean, it's possible, but whether he stays or does not stay, I think is not really material to the bigger game that Trump is planning to play on the global stage. And he finds Zelensky's attitude and approach to be an unnecessary obstacle because he has other plans. I mean, this is only his first move on the chessboard. And it's possible he could or could not, but I don't think we should attach great importance to that. Whoever comes in his place, assuming if he is removed, will likely be someone who Trump would be finding easier to deal with.
Hours after this spat ended, Zelensky gave an interview to Fox News in America, and he deliberately, I suppose, chose Fox News because it's Trump's favorite channel. And there he says that he believes the relationship, he's talking about the personal relationship between himself and Trump, can be salvaged. Do you think that's possible, or do you think the rift is so deep and so personal that this is a relationship that cannot really be healed?
Yeah, I think it's gone beyond repair. One is the leadership, the personal relationship between the two men, and the other is the relationship between the two countries. Insofar as the men are concerned, I think Zelensky realizes and will realize he would have gone back home and slept in his hotel room last night, and he would have understood that all is not well, and it will be very difficult to restore, because it didn't happen yesterday. It's been brewing. It's been brewing for weeks, for months, during the entire campaign of Trump. And Ukraine, and he has been listening to Trump and Ramaswamy and everyone else. So it's difficult, yet I don't think it'll be the same again.
What about the response from Moscow, the other party that is critically involved in the Ukraine-Russia struggle? President Putin's response, I imagine, will be the exact opposite of the response we can expect from Ukraine and Zelensky. Will Putin be smiling this morning? Will he now look upon Trump as his ally rather than perhaps Zelensky's?
In private, of course, I think he'll be smiling and he'll be patting himself on the back that what he began and his calculations and assessments of the consequences of what he did on the alliance, on the transatlantic structures, etc., have actually been proved to be correct. But that's in private. But in public and in more serious terms, he realizes that, yes, we've had this theater, but we are discussing very, very serious issues. When Trump talks about dragging the United States into a possible World War III, this is not for the faint-hearted. So what Putin is going to do is to internalize all that, of course, be happy, but realize that the difficult days are still ahead. And he will be put on notice and has been put on notice that if this is the language Trump can use, and these are the expectations he has of Zelensky, then what is coming at him from Trump? And he will drive a hard bargain with Putin.
Now, that's the question is, isn't it? That's the flip side. That if Trump is determined to secure peace and to avoid what he called World War III, then there will also be pressure on Putin to agree to a ceasefire and perhaps to vacate some of the land that Putin has occupied, which he says he's determined to keep. There will be, therefore, pressure on both sides.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is what I'm trying to say, that Putin will be and has been put on notice that, listen, you also have to concede. And I think they've had enough big back channel conversations in the last, I would say, 7, 8, 10 weeks, if not longer, to arrive at this understanding that Putin will back off Otherwise, Trump cannot sound so confident in public. He'll have egg on his face. So the back channel deals and understandings are at a very, very advanced stage. We will find Putin backing off and making compromises, making concessions. We can discuss the nature of those. But Putin, if Putin is the spoiler after all of this, he's in really big trouble.
Now, the other part of the world that faces major implications is Europe. After last night, how damaged is the Transatlantic alliance? Both Macron and Starmer must, I presume, be very worried men. Their visits to Washington earlier this week suddenly look as if they've come to naught.
I think Europe is in really big trouble. There is no question about it. Europe has been exposed. It is being challenged to transition from a teenager to an adult. It is failing in that transition. It has nothing to say for itself. I mean, I love the Europeans, etc., but they stand totally exposed. And I would only like to say to you, in my own conversations with American diplomats going back 10, 20, 30 years, the frustration the Americans had with the Europeans was told to me and to many of my colleagues even at that time. So in one sense, systemically, this was brewing for decades. Trump has been able to get that sentiment and capitalize out within his own country. And there is that very strong strand in American thinking about its approach to Europe as a partner, and to the whole body of Atlanticists who actually were dominating so far. So to answer your question, Europe is in big trouble, but I don't think they have the solutions even today, apart from issuing nice statements, issuing and appealing to people, to the world, to the world conscience. But when it comes to brass tacks, when it comes to hard power, they are very, very far away from helping themselves or Ukraine. And I think that's the frustration also in the White House.
Two voices from Europe that I recall spoke out this morning were first Friedrich Merz, who could be the new Chancellor of Germany, and he said Europe can no longer rely upon America. And that was very strong language coming from a German leader. And then Kaja Kallas, who's the European Union's High Representative, effectively the European Union's Foreign Minister, said that the free world needs a new leader. They've always looked upon the American president as the leader of the free world, but here's the European Union's High Representative saying, we need a new leader, Trump can't be it. Is there some sort of backlash developing in Europe?
Oh, there is. I mean, look, I don't think the liberal elites in Europe ever liked the rise of Donald Trump, whether it was 1.0 or whether it is today. And in conversations privately, the Europeans did not mince any words about their utter dislike for Trump and everything that he stood for. So it was happening in private. It's now out in the open. Now, the question which we have to ask is that if Europe wants to replace the United States as the leader of the free world, nothing is stopping it. The question is, how do you acquire this leadership? What are the attributes of that leadership? Moral suasion and soft power are not going to get you anywhere. This is the real world. And so Europe can say all of this, but they don't have a defense union. The OSCE is dead. They don't have a European defense force. They maybe have a military strategy of some sorts. Their military spending is abysmal. They don't have a military industrial complex. 70% of their military expenditure is incurred in the United States. So what does Europe bring to the table to acquire that leadership? And number two, the United Kingdom is not Europe, and we have to understand that. There is a big difference between what the Europeans say and what the UK says. Number three, within Europe, this is all going to happen. We will have, I think, to put it loosely, a multipolarity within Europe. France, Germany, Poland, Italy, and then the rest of the Europeans. And each of them, and now they are talking about this idea of the coalition of the willing inside Europe. And you wait till we come to the security guarantees and the presence of foreign troops to monitor and watch this, whatever ceasefire agreements are reached. So they may say all of this, but how do you translate what they are saying into action which is credible to their own people? And the European project today, was earlier, it began with the idea of integrating Europe. Today, they understand the project has shifted to protecting Europe, and they don't have the solutions for that.
Maybe, Mr. Saran, what does this mean for China's claim to Taiwan? Will President Xi feel he's got some sort of green light from Trump? After all, if Trump is prepared to sacrifice Ukraine in Russia's cause, might he be prepared to sacrifice Taiwan if his relationship with China improves?
It's a timing issue. He's got 4 years, and he has already again made it clear that on Taiwan he does not attach the same importance as the Democrats did. His primary goal, and since you've shifted to China, that really is an area of action on which Trump has been very careful in saying in saying anything after becoming president. Before becoming president, of course, he was very much more vocal. The only thing he's done is he's spoken to Xi Jinping on the telephone within a few days of taking office. But on Taiwan, he's been careful. But the signals coming out are he is not going to go hammer and tongs at playing Taiwan against China. But I think Xi Jinping is no Putin. He understands the stakes in Taiwan. And I think what Trump is trying to do by his demeanor and his bluster and his actions and everything else is to also issue a kind of a warning to other strongmen that you either deal with me in the manner in which I believe we can move forward, or you will face the consequences. And so I would put Taiwan in the broader context of how he visualizes China and how he visualizes the competition between the United States and China, which far transcends Taiwan. Taiwan is important, but there are so many of the elements, and this in fact goes at the heart. This competition issue goes to the heart of his campaign and his belief in making America great again, and to ensure the power domination of the United States vis-a-vis the other competing powers, of which China is by far the most important.
Let's for a moment, Mr. Saran, focus directly on Donald Trump himself. The American president, as you know, is a special person for heads of government all over the world. How will they view him after his behavior last night? I imagine, for example, that the King of Jordan and the President of Egypt, both of whom have differences with Trump over Gaza, which is the other international flashpoint on which Trump has been pretty outspoken, would be very perturbed this morning. And so too, I imagine Cyril Ramaphosa in South Africa, because only a week ago, the American Secretary of State refused to attend the G20 meeting in Johannesburg. I mean, are there heads of government who will have watched Trump's behavior last night and say, hallelujah, this is not good news for us. This is an America that we would be very uncomfortable having to handle?
No, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. It will send shockwaves across world capitals, particularly to those middle countries, middle powers, who are aspiring to take positions which do not agree with the president. But having said that, I think they also understand, and actually, almost the entire world understands that Zelensky and Ukraine is and was always a special case. And so there are no out here, whether it's Sisi or whether it is Ramaphosa or whether it is the King of Jordan. I mean, these people are for real. But yes, I mean, they would be concerned. There would definitely be, let's say, trepidation. I mean, no one wants to be talked down like this. So they may take a deep breath. But the question is whether we assess that Trump is going to exhibit this kind of behavior with people like them, or let's say with the president of Iran, when he meets them as he has done with Zelensky. I think there was a background to the Zelensky-Trump meeting and a history, as we discussed, which may not be applicable for these other middle power leaders. And of course, I think if you talk about Putin and Xi, I mean, obviously, I don't think he's going to speak like this to them.
Finally, Mr. Saran, is there a lesson here, or maybe a warning for India and Mr. Modi? Could our differences with America over tricky issues such as tariffs and illegal immigration lead to similar outbursts?
I think obviously we've got away scot-free in our first visit to the White House, and I think we should be pleased with ourselves that we were neither embarrassed nor humiliated, and we actually came out unscathed. But even in Trump 1.0, when I was around, on the trade and tariff issues, the negotiations privately were brutal, very frank. And this was happening even as Trump was gunning for China and establishing the Quad, etc. So the India-US relationship was riding on many tracks in parallel. The lesson there was that if there is an issue which is of, let's say, overriding concern for the Trump administration, they will go all out to press their case. But, the Indians are famous for their rope tricks, and we will find a way. And I think we have to give credit to ourselves for maneuvering and for managing. But I don't think at the level of the summit leaders you might ever see this kind of situation. But at second, third levels, at the level of negotiators and cabinet officials, it is possible it could be very rough. So the lesson for us is be careful, watch your step, don't assume how he's going to go forward, don't take friendship for granted as such. Remember, this is the real world. There are real interests, whether it comes to migration, technology, trade, FDI, H1B. And, you have to quickly adapt yourself to hard negotiation. And I think I have a feeling that our system has geared up to this. And this is a wake-up call for everyone, as I said.
Mr. Saran, thank you very much for the time you've given me, and thank you for sharing your very perceptive analysis about those amazing, dramatic, and sometimes even unbelievable developments last night. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Welcome back. I'm now joined by India's former ambassador to the United States, Meera Shankar. Mrs. Shankar, on Friday, the world witnessed an incredible, if not unbelievable, shouting match between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office. After it ended, the BBC reports Zelensky was told to leave the White House. It's the implications and consequences I want to discuss. But first, what was your response to this incredible development?
Well, this is not diplomacy, and certainly it's unprecedented for a meeting between heads of state and government. But of course, it comes from the fact that both are playing to their different domestic constituencies and both approach the same issue from a very different perspective. So, television makes for good theater, and they can address their respective constituencies at home.
Absolutely. In fact, at one point during that spat, President Trump actually said, this will make great TV. But you've seen the clips of what happened. You read about it in the papers this morning. Do you have any sense of who is to blame?
Well, I wouldn't say that anyone is to blame, but I think the new administration is in a hurry and it's showing impatience with Ukraine and with the Europeans who want to continue pursuing the old policy of somehow wearing down Russia. I think Trump wants to cut the Gordian knot quickly and proceed to reset relations with Russia. And from my point of view, strategically, that makes sense for the US because it's like, if it succeeds, it could be like the Nixonian moment where Nixon weaned away China from the Soviet bloc towards the US.
Let's then come against that background to the more important implications and consequences of yesterday's shouting match. First of all, where does this leave Zelensky and Ukraine? Presumably, he's unlikely to receive any more arms and equipment from America. So when he runs out of what he's already got, will Ukraine steadily collapse?
Look, I think Europe is also providing Ukraine with assistance and with weapons and equipment. So for some time, Ukraine may be able to stretch out its resistance to Russia. But I think what Trump is signaling very clearly and with impatience is that he's not looking towards a long-drawn negotiation where you keep trying to get more concessions from the Russians. He wants a quick end to the war. And the outlines have already been conveyed because
but that's where Trump clashes directly with Zelensky. Zelensky made clear that he has severe problems accepting a straightforward ceasefire because it will be tantamount to Ukraine surrendering. He also pointed out that he needs security guarantees if a ceasefire is to be meaningful and to last. Tell me, this has created such a deep rupture with America as far as Ukraine is concerned, and America is, as you know, Ukraine's most important partner. Can Zelensky survive in office after this? Or is it only a matter of time before he'll be eased out? He's anyway living on borrowed extra time.
Yes, I think it's a rupture not only with Ukraine, but also with Europe in a fundamental way. Unless Europe adjusts to Trump's policies, because they live cheek by jowl with Russia, they have been more concerned about what this may subsequently encourage by way of Russian behavior.
But let's focus for a moment first on Zelensky. Can he survive this?
Well, Trump has already pushed for elections in Ukraine. He has said that Zelensky has been ruling under martial law and that he needs to hold elections at the earliest so that there is a representative government in Ukraine. And of course, he said that Zelensky's support, popular support in Ukraine is virtually down to nothing. But of course, Zelensky has contested this, saying that polls show that he has
there's a bigger question, isn't there? Ukraine cannot afford to lose American support. I know that they have the complete commitment of the European countries, but America is the critical partner. And if the relationship between Trump and Zelensky has ruptured so badly that American support could be in danger, might Zelensky have to resign as a way of patching up the relationship?
Yes, that's a possibility. because America is the partner which matters as far as Ukraine is concerned. It's unlikely that the Europeans would be able to carry the Ukraine, conflict on their own shoulders vis-a-vis Russia, and certainly impossible that Ukraine could do it on its own if America does not support it. So I think for Ukraine, it's a time of reckoning, and it's a time of cutting their losses. Unfortunately, they have been losing territory in recent weeks.
But you're saying something very important. You're accepting that Zelensky may end up paying a personal price.
He could.
Tell me, how will all of this go down in Moscow? I would imagine that the only person smiling is President Putin. His response and the Russian response will be almost the exact opposite of the response from the Ukraine. He will now view Trump as his ally.
Yes, he is looking at Trump as someone who has policies which are more favorable to resetting relations with Russia. And indeed, this is what Trump tried to do in his first term as well, if you recall. But the deep state, if you will, created a tripwire in terms of the issue of Russian interference in the presidential election in the US, and that stymied Trump's hand in his first term. I think this time he's come very prepared to actually do what he wanted to in the first term. So he's not only looking at ending the conflict in Ukraine, he is really looking at resetting relations with Russia.
And that will be music to Putin's ears. And
yes,
already the two governments have held talks to see how they can resume diplomatic relations at the fullest level. Exchange of ambassadors is now being talked about in the American press.
Yes, they have agreed to actually reopen embassies and have full diplomatic representation in each other's capitals. And I think there are larger questions also, because for Russia...
The biggest question is, does this development strengthen Putin's hand against Ukraine? I noticed that Dmitry Medvedev, the former Russian president who also served as prime minister, has already on Twitter called Zelensky an insolent pig. Will the Russians feel that their hand has been fairly considerably strengthened in the continuing 3-year war with Ukraine?
Yes, certainly this is something which weighs in on Russia's position, because it is an incredible development that the US is accepting Russia's position. And you saw that at the UN itself, where the US voted against the European resolution and also abstained on its own resolution because the French moved amendments which the US didn't like. So it's one of those rare occasions where the US and Russia have voted on the same side in the UN. So clearly it strengthens Russia's hand vis-a-vis Ukraine. And
now the other part of the world that faces major implications is Europe. After last night, how damaged is the Transatlantic alliance? Both Macron and Starmer must be very worried men. Their visits to Washington earlier this week have suddenly come seemingly to naught.
Yes, and you can also see the statements made by the, Friedrich Merz, who has got the largest number of seats in the German elections and is likely to head a coalition government and become the chancellor. So he has said that Europe has to now move towards taking responsibility for its own defense and become independent or self-reliant. So I think that is a sentiment which is going to gather steam in Europe, that Europe must have its own foreign policy, it must have its own security and the capability to do so, because till now, Europe has relied on the US nuclear umbrella and on the US presence in NATO. Now Europe will have to pick up the bit and take on more responsibility for their own security and perhaps move towards a more independent position instead of ipso facto falling in line with the US.
What does this mean for NATO? At the heart of the Transatlantic Alliance lies, in fact, the NATO alliance. Traditionally, NATO has looked upon the American president as the leader of the free world. But Kaja Kallas, the European Union's High Representative, has now tweeted that the free world needs a new leader. That sounds as if people like her are repudiating the traditional American role of leadership of the free world. This suggests another fracture in that critical alliance.
I think President Trump is also signaling that he doesn't want to carry the burden of Europe on his shoulders and that Europe must take more responsibility for its defense. A corollary of that would be that Europe could move to a more independent position on its policies from the US. And to some extent, from India's point of view, that's a good thing because it means that there are more poles in the world with which to actually work.
Tell me, what does this mean for China's claim on Taiwan? I imagine that in Beijing, they are watching very sharply and acutely and with a certain amount of satisfaction the developments in the White House yesterday. Xi must feel he's got some sort of green light from Trump.
Well, I would hope not. But yes, Trump's signaling on Taiwan has been mixed. But they are actually doing weapons sales to Taiwan under the Trump administration. So I wouldn't say it's been as clear-cut as in Ukraine, where even during his campaign, Trump said that he is going to stop the war, halt the war in 24 hours. But vis-a-vis China, there are mixed signals coming from the Trump administration. On the one hand, they see China as the country which has the potential and capability and intention to challenge the US leadership in the medium to long run. And on the other hand, there is Trump's penchant for a deal with his adversaries. He's fascinated with that.
That is where the danger lies for Taiwan, doesn't it? If Trump decides it's time to improve the relationship with Beijing, and all it needs is for Xi to reach out and give that signal, Taiwan could be the sacrificial lamb, just as Ukraine looks like the sacrificial lamb in the relationship between America and Russia.
Yes, but I think with regard to Taiwan, Beijing at this juncture would wait to see what kind of deal that Trump is willing to strike with them rather than upset the apple cart by moving into Taiwan by force at this stage.
Let's come to Trump himself directly. The American president, as you know better than me, you've served in Washington as ambassador, is a special person for heads of government all over the world. How will they view him and his behavior after yesterday? I imagine, for instance, that the King of Jordan and the President of Egypt, who have differences with Trump over Gaza, which is the other major flashpoint in the world at the moment, would be very perturbed. And so too Cyril Ramaphosa, who suddenly discovered 10 days ago that the American Secretary of State was not going to come for a G20 meeting. These are heads of government that must be very concerned, because if they see Trump behaving in this, and I'll use that word deliberately, outrageous manner, they may get very worried that they could be the next victims of his anger or his behavior.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it looks like a new American imperium, if you will, because Trump believes that he can do what he wants. And on the other hand, there is this contradictory impulse to accept that the world can be divided into spheres of influence between the major powers, with the US, you know, supreme in the Western Hemisphere, that is the Americas, and going all the way to the Western Pacific, Russia having influence in parts of Europe, and China in East Asia. So there are these two contradictory impulses at play. On the one hand, the desire for an American imperium, and on the other hand, the desire to draw back from the world, let others take more responsibility and spend more and accept.
You know, the second possibility would be one of great concern to India. If Trump were to accept that Russia and China have a right to their spheres of influence, just as America has a right to its sphere of influence, India, as a neighbor of China, would be part of China's sphere of influence. He's suddenly then subordinating us to Beijing. Are there lessons here or warnings for India? Could our differences with America over things like tariffs and immigration lead to similar outbursts against us?
Look, I think with China, there's mixed signaling so far. I don't think a clear policy with regard to China has shaped up as yet.
What about India?
India, I think President Trump has clearly signaled that he doesn't see us in the League of Great Powers. But at the same time, when Prime Minister Modi went there, at least there was no blood on the floor, as you've seen in visits by other leaders. But clearly negotiating tariff differences and differences on trade and on immigration, I think these are going to be sticky points. But by and large for India, I think Trump has not been so hostile as he has been to some of his other partners like Canada and Mexico or even Europe.
My last question. Do you view yesterday's outburst in the White House as a sort of seminal moment in international politics?
Yes, I do view it as a seminal moment in international politics. And clearly you're going to see seismic shifts in the geopolitical landscape.
Mrs. Shankar, thank you very much for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.